going to repeat that because my recording died. So this beast represents the entire age of the Gentiles, culminating with the Antichrist rule of the world. The head of the beast, therefore, must be supreme world leaders who ruled in this age. So we must look across all four of the kingdoms in Daniel's age of the Gentiles to find the identity of the kings. We know that during the 2,600 plus years of the age of the Gentiles, there have been many more rulers than 7. So how do we know which ones are represented by these 7 heads? We get the answers from additional clues in the text. John is told 5 of the 7 kings have fallen, 1 is, and 1 will come for a short while. So as John received this revelation in 95 AD, 5 of the kings associated with the age had come and gone already. Before we start guessing, we need to remember the criteria for any nation or ruler to be considered part of Daniel's beast. They must conquer both Babylon and Jerusalem. Now we begin to see a connection between this chapter and Daniel. It has also been Babylon versus Jerusalem. Even in the way the Lord put together this age of discipline for Israel, he emphasizes the point of good versus evil. The nations that rule over Israel will also possess Babylon. So that ultimately we can say Israel has remained under Babylon's authority until Christ's return. So what supreme kings ruled over Jerusalem and Babylon and had died by the time John wrote Revelation? History records only 5, beginning with Nebuchadnezzar, dynasty in Babylon, followed by Cyrus, dynasty in Persia, and Alexander's short rule. Upon Alexander's death, Greece dissolved into 4 parts, just as the 4 wings of the leopard represented. Initially, the selected empire retained control of Babylon while the kingdom controlled Jerusalem. I have turned this off. Why is it still ringing?
So you named 3 that's already created.
Okay, so now we begin to see a connection between this chapter and Daniel. Okay, I got that part. Okay, so we got Cyrus, we got that. Okay. Upon Alexander's death, Greece dissolved into 4 parts, just as the 4 wings of the leopard representative. Initially, the empire retained control of Babylon while the kingdom controlled Jerusalem. Then in 246 BC, Ptolemy III attacked the Seleucid Empire and temporarily achieved control over both Babylon and Jerusalem. Later, in 170 BC, Antipas Epiphanes IV of the Seleucid Empire attacked the Ptolemaic kingdom and gained control of both. So by John's day, 5 kings and kingdoms had ruled Babylon and Jerusalem during the age of the Gentiles. In that way, each of these kings pictured the Antichrist in the simple sense that they did what the Antichrist would one day do. In John's day, one still in authority in the same way. Gentile Titus conquered Jerusalem in AD 70 and ruled over Babylon when he ascended to the Empire of Rome. Following Titus, the Roman Empire and its remains continued to exert control over both cities off and on until 1923. The next head to conquer both will be the Antichrist during tribulation. The Antichrist will be the last world leader to gain control over both places. He comes for a little while, meeting 3.5 years, doing what his predecessors did, but doing it even more violently. So the 7 heads are those kings who led Satan's kingdom, spiritual Babylon, serving God's purpose of Gentile domination over Israel. And as a harlot rides these kings throughout the history of the age of the Gentiles, she eventually settles on the Antichrist. These kings were her benefactor, and the harlot was an enabler for them to gain control. Together, Satan ruled the world by deception and lies and greed and lust. Then in the tribulation, the relationship becomes even closer as she rides one world leader. Finally, the 10 horns, the 10 kings who led the world at the start of the tribulation, exist only for the purpose and that they give their authority to the beast. The only purpose these kings serve is to support God's program to bring the Antichrist to power. Ultimately, they and their kingdoms are brought to an end with Christ's coming. And finally, now that we understand spiritual Babylon, let's see how judgment comes to her. So let's look at the last scripture there, 17:15 through 18. Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw, where the prostitute sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over to the beast their royal authority until God's words fulfilled. The woman you saw in the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. So during the age of the Gentiles, God put Satan's counterfeit religion system to work for God's own purposes in disciplining Israel. But now God sends the 7 bowl judgments to bring an end to this corrupt counterfeit system. In verse 16 and 17, we're told the Antichrist and the world rulers under him come to hate the harlot. At mid-tribulation, when Satan indwells the Antichrist, he directs that all worship be given to him. He puts an end to any form of worship and religious practice. So all religious institutions, temples, churches, mosques, and other places of worship are destroyed. These physical structures and the relics within are burned with fire, and we're told in verse 16, these constitute the flesh of the harlot. And all religious institutions are stripped of their wealth, so she is made desolate and naked. The angel says in verse 17 that these kings are working to fulfill God's purpose, though they think it's their own idea. So after the 7th bowl is poured out, the only false religion worshiping remaining on earth will be the worship of Satan, which also has been the goal of the spiritual Babylon from the beginning anyway. So now the spiritual Babylon is no more. All that remains of idolatry and false religion is Satan and the Antichrist and the false prophet. And in verse 14, we're told that Jesus will take care of them himself upon his return. So the Lord used the 7 judgment to greatly simplify the problem of cleansing the world of false religion. He allowed Satan to do it for him, so that at his second coming he need only destroy one man to end all idolatry.